Hello, my name is Sarah Fuller and I'm the Clinical Lead Dietitian for Northamptonshire CAMHS, and this is the dietetic sessions of the Children and Young People's Eating and Feeding Difficulties workshops. So our primary nutritional concern is the young person eating and drinking enough to allow them to grow? And we know that growth is driven by our genetics and also our nutrition, the food that we eat and drink. So if we have a young person who is born for really tall parents, they're much more likely to be on the higher centiles. And if you are a child born from very shorter parents, then you're much more likely to be on the lower centiles. And actually what we notice is that children will have growth spurts where they deposit fat stores and they kind of chunk out a little bit, and then they use that additional energy stores to allow them to grow up in height. And you'll be very familiar with the Red Book from when they were much younger, when you were getting health visitors doing weight and length checks. And this is a really good opportunity that we can start monitoring your child's growth now through the Red Book. Or if you can't find it, there's an Red Book app. And what we say is not to monitor it too frequently, because children grow not in a linear way. They grow in little growth spurts. And so what we advise is not to monitor growth too frequently. Monitoring growth every day would just cause a lot of anxiety and distress for everyone. So we would suggest monitoring growth in around every 4 to 6 months. So every 4 months, roughly, that's every half terms. That's a good time to do it as a little kind of placeholder in your calendar. Every half term, just monitor weight and height, and then you can plot them in the Red Book. Now, it's not focusing on the individual number. What we want is to zoom out and look at the bigger picture. If someone is tracking along their centiles, what we will see is that that will be a good reflection of normal growth. What we're looking for is that trend over time. If someone's been poorly just before you measure them, expect their weight to be a little bit down, and we know that weight, when we track it, can kind of bobble up and down. And so we know that some children kind of mirror the centiles. So if they're tracking along the 50th for weight and height, or they might track along the 9th for weight and height, and that will be normal for them. So this is where the historical measurements are really important. So we can see, is this child always growing along these centiles? And it's the concurrent measurements that allow us to track growth properly. So this doesn't have to be a healthcare appointment. This can be done on scales and measurements back of the kitchen door at home. This gives you a good idea of if your child is growing and tracking along, because what we know with children with feeding and eating difficulties is their intake is really different from one day to the next. Some days they will hardly eat anything, and that causes a lot of concern, understandably, for parents, and other days they'll eat better. And so tracking growth allows us to say, overall, between these kind of 4 to 6 months, has the nutrition been adequate enough for the young person to grow? So if we're happy that someone is growing in proportion and growing as we would expect them to, our next nutritional concern is around getting the volume of the food right. We know that lots of our young people with feeding and eating difficulties can have really small appetites, and they will report that after a few bites that they are full, whereas others can have really large appetites and eat an entire bag of chicken nuggets or several portions of fries. And so addressing small appetites first of all. So we know that small appetites can cause great frustration for parents around the expectation of what should be eaten at a meal. And we would suggest, rather than focusing on 3 larger meals and some smaller snacks, focus on 6 mini meals throughout the day. So actually that's eating every couple of hours, every 2 to 3 hours. And if you have a range of foods in their diet that they're willing to accept, then try and rotate through. So if they've got a couple of breakfasts that they are able to tolerate, whether it's 1 Weetabix, a slice of toast, or a portion of a croissant or something, try and rotate it through so that they don't get taste fatigue and they don't get bored and drop that food, having eaten it every day for a number of weeks, if not months. And we know that for small appetites, avoiding drinking large volumes of fluids just prior to a meal will be really helpful in allowing someone to eat extra food at that meal. So make sure they don't fill up on additional fluids. If you're a young person who needs to drink whilst they're eating, then of course that's absolutely okay. If they need a sip in between each mouthful, that's fine, but try not to offer large drinks before the meal so that they're not already full for when that mini meal comes. Whereas if we look at the larger appetites, these can lead to being a little bit overweight. And that's where we know that tracking the growth and the trajectory of the growth, if someone's crossing up the centiles for their weight, then it identifies that actually they may not be able to recognise if they are feeling full, in the same way that small appetites are overly sensitive to recognising when they are feeling full after a few bites. So it's the opposite for these young people. And so later on, my colleague will go through the kitchen open and kitchen closed process that will allow parents to be able to help a young person regulate their appetite and to stop this overeating. And we may look at moderating larger portion sizes and saying, you know, if someone's eating 20 chicken nuggets, is 20 the right portion for them? Do we bring it down? If we look at asking them if they are hungry, if they are able to wait 10 minutes and have they forgotten about it? Is this part of their routine, that this is just what I normally have? So next on the list of nutritional concerns, we want to look at the balance of the types of foods that someone's eating and drinking. And so we are looking at the balance between protein, fats and carbohydrates. And we know that this is a big concern for many parents, because they notice that lots of our people who struggle with feeding and eating difficulties don't have their fruits and veggies, and so there's a lot of concern that they're not having a balanced diet, what they're eating isn't healthy. And hopefully this slide sums up really well why someone might struggle with eating fruit or vegetables. So blueberries here, they can be juicy, they can be squishy, they can be sweet, they could be sour, they could be blue, they could be dark blue, they could be almost black, they could be small or large. So every blueberry within the punnet will be very, very different. Whereas a processed food is going to be the same every time. Another really good example is bananas. They could be yellow, they could be green, they could have black bits on, they could be curvy, they could be straight, they could be large, they could be small. And even within the banana, if it's bruised, you might get different colours. So the expectation of what that food is going to be different every single time. And what we know is that lots of parents report more success with things like fruit puree pots or pouches, fruit that is from a tin, because things like tinned peaches are very, very similar. Tinned pineapple chunks are going to be very, very similar every single time. So they are the expectation for that young person of what am I going to put in my mouth. That is met. It's going to be the same every time. Things like fruit winders or shop-bought smoothies in a carton, not a freshly made one, for the same reason that different ingredients would make something taste different. But smoothies that allow a young person to get one of their 5 a day through that nourishing drink, because these will all be the same every time. And what you might notice is if there's a small detail in the change of the packaging, so if there's an offer, if there's a 3 for 2 logo on it, your young person may reject that food, even if it's the same, because it looks different. The expectation is that's changed, so it might have changed in my mouth, so I'm not going to eat it. So just be wary of stickers and logos and things like that may change from time throughout the year. So as explained on the last slide, lots of our young people do struggle with getting their 5 a day. So we like to reframe it as getting our 5 a day a different way. And so we can focus on fortified foods. So we know that any food in the UK that's made from white flour will be fortified with iron, calcium, niacin and thiamine by UK law. And from 2026, we will also have folic acid added into this flour. So we know that white bread is therefore going to be great for restricted diets. We can reframe this as one of our 5 a day. We're getting vitamins and minerals, and we've had young people who meet their whole calcium content without eating any dairy, but they're eating enough white bread. And there are certain brands of bread that have additional vitamins fortified in there, so look out for that. If you've got a young person who wants white bread but it doesn't matter about the brand, you can say, I've got a different brand here and we're going to try this one, and make sure that they know it's a different brand, but they are quite likely to be able to accept it. We know that breakfast cereals in the UK are also really well fortified with B vitamins, and likewise some of the porridges, Ready Brek and Celeriac as well. And so fortified breakfast cereal or porridges could be really great as a mini meal or a good snack before bed. Some of the breakfast cereal bars and biscuits are well fortified. Nutrigrain, Belvita and Farley's Rusks are really good examples where they've got additional iron and lots of minerals added to them. And lots of the children's yogurts will have additional vitamin D and some other vitamins added depending on the brand. With things like milkshake powders, so if you've got a young person who will have anything as long as it's chocolatey or anything as long as it's strawberry, this can be a really great way of getting some extra vitamins into their diet, and also having a good dairy source in their diet as well. So Nesquik have fortified theirs, but also Tesco do a good milkshake mix, and Horlicks and Milo hot chocolates are also very well fortified. Squashes, some of our young people get all of their vitamin C's just from their squash that they drink, and Ribena and Vimto have are really well fortified, so check on the label if your squash is fortified. Also Tesco have just launched a vitamin squash as well that has, I think, at least 8 vitamins added into it, and so that could be really helpful. Some of the milks that our young people are able to take, Arla do their big milk, and I think it's got the Gruffalo on, so you can recognise it in the shop, but also a lot of the soya milks or fortified plant milks will have additional vitamins and minerals added. There's also an over-the-counter product called Pediasure, and it comes in a tin, and it comes in a variety of flavours, I think strawberry, banana, chocolate and vanilla, and that could be a really good, well-balanced vitamin and mineral supplement for someone to take, even if they take it a couple of times a week. And additionally, some of the spreads that our young people have, so margarine is fortified by UK law, and our Marmite and yeast extract spreads are a really good source of vitamin B. So all of these fortified foods are an excellent way of getting your 5 a day a different way. So if someone isn't able to have those fortified foods that we just spoke about, then often what we would suggest is an over-the-counter vitamin and mineral supplement. And these come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. But it's really important to highlight that most of our young people will initially, when we introduce a new thing, will say, no, thank you very much, I am not having that. And so it may take at least 100 times over 100 days to get this consistently in place. If we try and only do it every other day or a couple of times a week, then we're unlikely to get that routine. So what we suggest is not hiding these vitamins and mineral supplements in food, so because that risks that food tasting or smelling or looking slightly different, and then that food being dropped and refused. If your young person is old enough to say, you need this vitamin and mineral supplement, why don't we try it in your chocolate spread or your icing or this, and for them to understand that it might taste slightly different, then that's a conversation you can have, and they may accept it because the food or drink may have an overwhelming taste or flavour that masks that vitamin and mineral. But it's really important that we don't add these to foods and drinks without the young person knowing. So what we'd also suggest is when we're trying something every single day to be linking it to a non-food routine. If we sit at the kitchen table and say at breakfast, this is when you need your gummy, or this is when you need your syrup, or this is when you need to have your spray, it heightens anxiety around the new food at that mealtime. So it makes that mealtime a harder experience for the young person. So try and link it to a non-food routine. So it could be cleaning teeth, it could be part of the bedtime routine, it could be part of the routine when we come in from school. And even at weekends, try and keep it to that same time. So the more consistent you are, the more likely someone is going to accept it. Because if we know at 4 o'clock every day, this is when I have my vitamin, there is no additional anxiety when that happens. Now, if you go into the supermarket or a pharmacy, there is an entire aisle now dedicated to children's and adults' vitamin and mineral supplements, and they are in lots of different styles now. That is going to be really helpful for us. You know your child best, and so you know what you're more likely to have success with. So there are liquids and drops, there are chewable gummy style vitamins, there's a new chocolate flavoured gummy style one, the Yum V Kids supplement that we've had some good success with. We have Vitamix in sprinkles, which are a little sachet that you can they look like a little salt sachet, and you can open them up and add them to something that is a semi-solid. So things like jam, peanut butter, chocolate spread, icing, those sorts of things, and you can add and mix them in, and they have a little coating around them that makes them tasteless and odourless. And you have around 30 minutes before that coating has dissolved. And so you can add that into those semi-solid foods, let the young person know, and they won't have any adverse taste or smell experience from that. Some parents have found that they have been able to add sprinkles into drinks if their young person is able to drink that drink relatively quickly within that half an hour. If your young person can swallow tablets, there are vitamin and mineral supplements that are A to Z that are nutritionally complete, and that would be your one-stop shop. If they can take that tablet, then we're winning. We've covered that 5 a day. We also have the Paw Patrol and some other brands do some effervescent, so some fizzy drinks. So if you've got a young person who really likes fizzy drinks, that could be a win. And even if we offer them just if they accept any fizzy drink, it can be something that we have once a day, or it could be just at the weekends, things like that. But there are also vitamin sprays that we can do, and we know that lots of parents have success from using different approaches, and it might be that we get a spray or a gummy in most days, and when we cook we use Vitamix and sprinkles in things like adding them into baked beans or adding them into icing, things like that. So you can use a number of different strategies, whatever suits you and your family and your young person. Just a word of caution against things like patches and the rub-in gels, because there's very little evidence that these actually can get absorbed through the body and to actually address any micronutrient deficiencies or low levels that your young person may have. And our final slide here is some additional vitamin and mineral strategies that you might want to consider. So the Lucky Iron Fish, this can be added to cooking water. So if your young person has rice or pasta or noodles, even if it's occasionally, using the Lucky Iron Fish allows some iron from that fish to be leached into the water and then absorbed by the food. We've had some really good success with some families who have been able to boil up some water in the evening once the young person's gone to bed, and they let that cool, and the next day that's that boiled water with the iron from the Lucky Iron Fish is then used for their school drink the next day, and actually we've seen some iron levels normalise as a result. So that can be a really helpful tool in your vitamin and mineral toolbox. Another iron strategy might be the Sapatone liquid iron sachets, and they are tasteless, and so other parents have said that they've had really good success with that. Likewise, for those who really struggle with dairy, there are some calcium gummies on the market, but most children, if you didn't have any dairy in your diet may have to have several of those gummies every single day in order to meet their lower levels. And the best over-the-counter supplement for children and young people is the WellKid Liquid Calcium, and that has an orange flavour and is often quite well tolerated. And you can consider, rather than using a teaspoon or a spoon for measuring it out, using a medicine syringe could be a really helpful strategy for parents, because it masks the smell that if your child is reacting to that smell. And again, just wanted to reiterate that the Pediasure milkshake is available in the tins that you make it up like you would an infant formula, so kind of using powder and water, shaking it up and making it that way. It can also, that milk, that Pediasure milk can also be used in making things like milk ice lollies or angel delight puddings or milk-based puddings and things like that. So that can be a really helpful addition, sort of as and when your child is able to have those things, or it could be a daily drink that they have. That is slightly different from a prescribed Pediasure, which is a liquid pre-made form that you would get a prescription from your GP, but this is an over-the-counter product that would be open to anyone using.